Welcome back to the Make Away podcast, and we are all about story today. So, Dad, diving right in, what would you say makes a great story?
Well, I think for any story to be great, it has to have resonance. So the idea of resonance is this word to sound back. Anytime we've talked about before, like the piano strings.
Yes.
When you strike a note on the piano, you're actually hearing three different strings that give you the fullness and the resonance of that tone. The human ear can hear it. But yeah, for I think any story to be great, we have to be able to resonate with it. And when I resonate, then I become immersed.
Yes.
So yeah.
Can you give me an example of recently where you either saw an image or heard a story from someone that was telling a story or watched a film that you're like, yes, the fullness?
Yeah, the one that we just watched, which was a really sad story, but it resonated. Was I believe the title is Train Dreams, and it was almost like someone's life, a man's life without the presence of God, and if he didn't have anyone around to tell his story, and that's kind of like you're left at the end going, what was the purpose? What was the reason? And the man did all of these things in his life. He loved, he had children. He loved this woman, and he worked on the railroads. He did all these amazing things, but at the end of it, he was just by himself. He was alone.
Yes.
And yeah, but yet he still had a story, even though there was no one to tell his story. He had a story. So that resonated with me because everybody, I believe, has a story.
Yes.
Everybody has a story. Even people when they say, "Oh, I don't have a story." Yes, you actually do. Yeah, there's something beautiful and good and true, I think, in all of us.
Yes, 100%. I think that's fascinating of just how we have lived life. We have experienced things, and it's arguable. Like, we live in a fallen world. There has been the good things, like you said, and there's the, well, almost 100% of the mistakes that's been made, and that is a story all the more interesting, I think, coming from a Christian perspective. I'll speak for myself, seeing how God works through a person through the ups and the downs. I also watched a fascinating video essay recently, not exactly about resonance, that's how storytelling has shifted over the years, how films, it was more about movies, these days sound more preachy because in a lot of the classic films that we think of, Lord of the Rings or The Matrix or the Harry Potter films, they used visual storytelling to build a world that really immersed you consistently, even if you didn't fully, let's say, understand the world or even agree with a lot of the viewpoints in the world. You were able to resonate because they built a world where you just felt what it was like to be in this unique world. This, think about The Matrix again and Lord of the Rings. There was a visual language that was about life versus I think these days when a character starts talking about a message and they're like, oh, this should be this way or things like that. There's much more showing versus telling. I think that's very, very interesting. As you said, how resonance is striking a chord, but it's not just the message, right? It's not just the understanding, but it's the fullness. It is seeing the life, the humanity, and how all of that comes together. And so, in that sense, with resonance, what are some of the key things that help a story you feel like have resonance? Let's say, thinking about what we do at Degaje Studios, gratitude projects, and dealing with people who might say, oh, I don't feel like I have much of a story. What are some of the things that you think everyone resonates with?
Well, I think we all have. I think we all have a nature about us where humans, people want to be challenged. I don't think they do as much as they used to, but we all have this desire. If you've heard a good story or watched a good story,
Yes.
when you finish reading that book or you walk out of that movie theater, you have hope. You know, you're, how am I going to be a better person? Or, you know, I want to do something like that. You know what I mean? I want to live a life that mattered like that. You know, you want to, how am I going to be a better man? That kind of thing. And so I think one thing we all want to do because we're human, we want to relate. I think that's a key to resonance. I think is we have to be able to relate to it. If I'm watching a story and I can't relate to it, I'm constantly being pulled out. I'm constantly not being able to immerse in the story because I can't relate with it. And I'm left constantly a little confused.
Yeah.
Or a little feeling like that's outside of me, and it's almost like breaking that fourth wall, like we've talked about. Is, you know, I'm not resonating, I'm not relating, and so now I'm kind of like, I know I'm watching a story. You know, I mean, it's just there. You know, it's almost like someone looking directly at the at the camera. You know, and suddenly you're very aware. You know that you're outside of a story. So I think relating, being able to relate, and being able to immerse is something that, and then being able to challenge, to be challenged.
Yeah.
We all have, I think, a desire to do that deep down.
Yes. I think that just goes in, as you are saying, into good stories of like, if nothing happens, that is what we would call a boring story. But to that point, then, let's talk about being a good storyteller. The importance of challenging perspective. I believe a good story is one that shapes your view of the world, as you said. I'll just throw in another example. I've watched the Band of Brothers mini show or mini series many times, and I just feel like every time, especially as a young man watching that, there's just this sense of, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
And just this sobering processing of seeing genuinely the heart and just these ordinary guys, right? These are soldiers in an extraordinary time who came from South Dakota or came from New York City, and they were now in the trench together, you know, in Europe, fighting for their country. Anyway, so I think that was a fascinating, just beautifully done series. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. And that, even though it was in a different time period and telling stories about that, that's very almost mythologized, honestly, in our history. It was so resonating that it made me change how I viewed my life as a young man. But yeah, well, what do you think is that? What are some elements that you've seen over your many decades of being an artist and photographer? Are elements that help someone be a good storyteller that resonates and relates?
Well, I think like now my mind is on Band of Brothers, and I'm going over that. But, you know, I love, one of my favorite things about that miniseries is at the end with I think he was a German general, and he's speaking. They allow him to speak to his men, and that's where the whole idea of the Band of Brothers title comes from. You know, and he talks about how, you know, they fought with one another. They were in the trenches with one another. They you know, life or death situations with one another, held each other in the hardest of times and the darkest of times, and bled together and cried together, all of these different things. And then he talks about being brothers. And I think if that doesn't speak to relating, what does? You know, brotherhood is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I think that makes it's a great story because I think we all have a deep desire to have a brotherhood. You have a good lifelong friendship. You have a brotherhood. You actually start calling one another brother, you know, instead of by name.
Yeah.
And I think it's a beautiful concept and a story if you can connect people in that way. And that's all about resonation, you know, how you resonate. Like if I, like a good example is I watched the movie, I can't remember the name of it now. You'll probably remember, but it was about Antifa and the sheriff.
Oh, Eddington.
Eddington. Yeah, I watched that and I couldn't resonate with it. It was because they were intentionally, I think, stepping all over one another in their lines. And it kept pulling me out, or I couldn't hear. I was like, what was that? What is he saying? And I did definitely feel the tension, which I think I was supposed to feel because it was all about COVID and how it's just completely stupid that was at that time, all around our country. but I couldn't resonate with that film. I ended up turning it off. And, you know, I've heard it, other people, I heard you say it was actually a really great story.
I think that's a
Yeah.
great, fascinating example because, um, yeah, I get in some ways I can say that I resonated in that with that film just because yeah, it was very tense. It showcased a lot of people call it a neo western, right? It's set in a western town, and the 6 feet apart is like a the new standoff. But I think to your point of how people were like it was very tense. I think what actually resonated with me is that the aspect where the characters what it just illustrated both sides of the issue, if you want to call it that, right? People who believe a certain way and other people who believe a different way, and all of them had a some kind of external motive, which is very interesting to me. Um, they held their beliefs. I think most of us want to believe that, like, oh, we hold on to this because we genuinely believe in these things, but oftentimes it's as simple as, oh, we have a crush on this other girl who has this belief, so we need to, or I need to impress my wife, or I am losing control of my family, I need to like it's just fascinating in that sense. And so I think that's a good example of how what you touched on, how with that film, um there was this sense of tension that for you drew you out of that story and did not resonate with you.
Yeah. I mean, you compare that to Band of Brothers. You know, I definitely resonated with that, and I definitely felt that brotherhood. I watched that thing from start to finish, you know, where with Eddington, I, you know, yeah, I had the same experience. I lived through COVID too, you know, the craziness of all of that, but there wasn't that everybody was kind of polarized in that film.
Sure. Yeah.
There was no brotherhood. I didn't feel any kind of brotherhood happening.
Yes.
Even, I think right before I turned it off, even though the sheriff's department was even starting to turn on one another, you know, I'm like, okay, I can't follow the lines anyway, and now I'm just bored and I'm not in the story, and
Totally.
you know,
You know, and yeah, I mean, you want to get into the artistry and storytelling area. I enjoyed the film, but there's arguments to be made, and I've heard reviews online where they say, yeah, the story goes does go in a crazy direction. If you've seen the film, I mean, every day go into all of that. So it's an argument of whether the story itself landed well. But that's such a fascinating and great point again of would you say then, as we think about stories and resonance, do you need to always include something that is, well, you can say positive? Just because, for example, the shows we're talking about now in film, Banner Brothers is lifting up brotherhood, which is a shared core human experience across cultures, versus a show like Eddington, for all of its strengths and in some ways weaknesses, it really was more focused on the conflict, the negatives, right? So do you think that's a significant factor in being able to focus on what is encouraging versus just the the mess?
I do personally, just because I think it's so easy to be fixated on the negative, and there's so much of that pummeling our way every day towards us,
Yes.
knocking us down. We get enough of that in our day. I would rather tell stories that lift up and encourage, that hold people in the highest regard. And just, you know, as we were talking about gratitude projects, and even the new project that we're starting to think about, which is the Good People Project. Just picking someone in our community, a neighbor, someone in the community that has made an influence or an impact, and community nominated stories. It was interesting because as we were talking about one specific person that we wanted to lift up and tell their story, someone knew that person and knew that person from,
Yeah.
40 years ago, and was like, oh, tell his story. And it was like, yeah, but see, I don't know him. I don't have 40 years of history with him that you do.
Yes.
And 40 years of hard things and maybe negative things or sad things or things that he did wrong. I always say everybody's got a little dirt in the bottom of their cup.
Yeah.
You know, everybody has sinned or had made mistakes in their life.
Mm.
But if that's all we focus on, what's the point of anything? You know, I think the greater thing is, what did we learn from those sins or those mistakes or those failures, and how did that make us a better person? That particular individual, I only know one version of him, and it's the version of where he went through a lot of failure and hard times, and lost family and marriage and whatnot, and at the other side of that came through that gauntlet and found Jesus Christ and became this man who loves to encourage people and loves to find his neighbors outside and will go to absolutely stop what he's doing, get out of his car even if he's driving by, and come and encourage you. And I just think that that's a really beautiful way to lift up what's good and true and beautiful about someone instead of focusing on the 40 years it took you to learn those lessons. And that's where you start talking about legacy and passing down what really matters.
Yeah. No, that's a huge point. What would you say is the difference, as we dive into legacy a little bit, between being honest about, as you said, someone's story and someone's life, right? Because I think some people, just off the back, they hear like, oh, include something positive. I don't think we're advocating for simply like positive thinking. No, oh, we're just gonna everything is nice, rainbows and unicorns. That's we talked about how there is challenge in this world, there is conflict in this world. We are challenged in a good way and drawn to these stories when we see how we struggle in a row. So what are some ways you feel like that is balanced, especially as we talk about the Good People Project and gratitude projects? Like, some people we talk to, as you say, will have challenging, difficult, even, we call it negative lives. And what is the difference between like just focusing on the good, like these are the nice little things versus like a full picture resonance, like all three strings being hit?
I think, it's that's part of where we have to be gifted and talented because it's really about finding the story.
Yes.
As you don't want to just throw those positive markers in there because you're hoping for a positive message. You want to actually resonate with people. And so if someone had a tough life or they were just an absolute jerk, you know what I mean? Are people going to resonate when you start just singing this man's praises? No, they probably not. They're going to be like, that's not the guy I knew. No, like, and so finding the story and telling not just what's positive, but lifting up what was good, what that man might have learned through his hardships, and who the man is now. I see a redemption story.
Yes.
And I don't see a man who just totally failed in his life. I see a man who came through the struggle, came through the fire, came out the other side, and is a better man for it.
Yeah.
There's a story, right? There's a great story. So it's finding the story, I think, is really important. It's easy to just dismiss or write someone off because they've had some great failure, some big mistake that they made, some absolutely stupid move that they did that was maybe selfish and arrogant, everything else. That, when you're young, you strive to be the king of the hill. And people leave a lot of damage in their wake.
Yes.
But I always believe, if you're still breathing, God's not finished with you yet.
Yeah.
And so I think you can find a lot of redemption and a lot of worth in looking for what made him the man that he is today, that stops and wants to encourage the random neighbor because he knows that matters.
Yes.
That's important. That's how I think we're going to relate with people, is because all of us want that, right? We all have a desire for that, for those deeper truths. It's like when you listen to someone who's much more elderly than you, and they say something profound. It strikes in there. That's very deep. That's that's a great nugget of wisdom. You know what I mean? We all feel that, like, wow. And that came from years, maybe decades of pain or suffering that brought that wisdom. And it when you see it, you can feel it. So
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, on that note, if you are interested in what we do at Degaje Studios, look into the gratitude projects and our upcoming project. We're calling it the Good People Project. That is a work in progress. We're very excited about that. But do visit our website, degajestudios.com. So that is DEGAJE studios.com. And there is much more information about that. We would love to hear from you guys. There is so much more storytelling. We could go on about stories all day.
Yeah.
So that's what this podcast is for. If you enjoy this, if you enjoy discussions about legacy and story and why this matters, and especially in today's world, join us as we continue to explore stories together.
He always finds a way. Journeyman, making a way, just a journeyman.